quite excited today to be reviewing the DC Multiverse McFarlane Toys Riddler figure based on his appearance in Arkham City. Now, like a lot of people, I'm a huge fan of that series of games and have very fond memories of making my way through them. And of course, the Riddler was a major character across all of those games. And in particular, Arkham City stands out as one of those landmark gaming experiences. And whilst the Riddler's never been my favourite member of Batman's rogues gallery, I've always had a soft spot for the character and his overall look and design, and I think the Arkham interpretation from those games really did a nice job of reinventing this character, but staying true to the overall look and design. Now sadly, I was never able to get my hands on the DC Collectibles version of this character, so I was really eager to make sure that I picked up McFarlane Toys' offering. So let's see how he stands up. As ever, we'll start off by looking at the packaging, and as ever, I'm underwhelmed by it because it is very consistent. If nothing else, you can say that this line stayed true to its overall design aesthetic across about, 3, 4, 5 years now? Yeah, okay. Essentially, giant window display, which is all good. We can see the figure popping out there, which is fantastic. Behind him, we have that blue-white collage with various comic book covers and things, which is a perfectly nice design. But the rest of it is just these big black borders. This is emphasised even more when we look at the side panel, and as I always say, it's a gigantic waste of space because we just have the character's name here, and I would much rather have had some artwork taken from the computer game in this instance, or even just a photo of the figure. Would have been really cool when putting these up on your shelf if you're stacking them side by side, but sadly we don't get that. We just get this, and it's a real shame because it's such a big chunk of space, this side panel. It's a real shame that we haven't filled it with more colour as something more interesting. Nevertheless, if we flip it over and look at the back of the packaging, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is much better. This is largely text free, and we have this very striking image here taken from the game. Of course, the Riddler there with one of his Riddler trophies. This is pretty striking. This is really cool. This you can put on display, and it looks pretty nice. Okay, so looking at the figure himself, I have to say I have mixed feelings about this figure overall, and it's a shame because I think the potential was there to have an absolutely awesome figure all round. If we start off by looking at the head sculpt, I have to say they've done a pretty nice job. They've got that sneer there that is so appropriate for this character. I think they've caught the likeness as based on the game pretty well. The paint apps, for the most part, are nicely rendered. There's some different colorization on the top of the cheekbones there as well, and on the chin, which I think is really good. And we can even see a little bit of a plaster on the bridge of his nose, I think. And what's really nice is that if we lift his shades up, we can actually see some detailing on the eyes underneath there as well. So these haven't just been sculpted in, which is a lovely touch, and I think a real surprise to me, to be honest. I thought that was really cool. That said, it's a shame that the glasses themselves are maybe more of a translucent plastic as they appear in the game, but that's a very minor niggle. I think overall this is pretty effective. I have no real issues here. The only thing that I would really note is how the brim of the hat, for example, there's no shading, there's no paint wash on this, and this is going to be a problem that runs throughout this figure, as we're kind of used to seeing with McFarlane Toys. If we look at the rest of the body, the sculpting is great. We can see the individual question marks sculpted into his jacket, for example. But there's no paint on these. These should be yellow. They should be gold or something like that, and they have not been painted in, which is a real shame. If we look at the reverse of the figure, we can see that that big giant question mark has been painted in with it's got the purple lining, it's got the sort of gold paint in the middle. This looks absolutely fantastic, but each question mark should be like that on his jacket, and it's a real shame because the detail is there in the sculpt, it just hasn't been capitalized on. And even if you're not going to go that route and paint each one in individually, it's a real shame that we don't have more of a wash running through the rest of this body to give it some shading, give it some texture and depth, and it's really lacking, and it's very noticeable. It is not exclusive to this figure. This seems to be how McFarlane Toys are operating across the board, and it's such a shame because they're just missing the boat ever so slightly, because they've put the hard work into the sculpt. Why not just put a nice wash over some of this detail to really help it pop? We can see a little bit of a wash running through his boots, which is really nice. It just gives it that extra level of texture, and it's a shame they didn't do that for the rest of the figure. Okay, so looking at articulation, there is a ball joint at the top of the neck there, so the head can move from side to side, it can lean left and right at really healthy distance, and it can also nod up and down a really good distance as well. So fantastic range here, which is great to see. There are ball joints in the shoulders, and again, those arms can lift all the way up and all the way out, which is fantastic. There is a complementary bicep swivel as well, and there are double joints at the elbow. Now, there is that frustrating ball joint that McFarlane Toys like to use in this DC Multiverse line. I'm not a huge fan of it, but here it works pretty well and it looks okay. The hand can rotate all the way around, and of course it will hinge forwards and backwards as well. Now, there are two points of articulation in the torso. There is a ball joint in the waist, allowing the figure to move from side to side, lean left and right, and it will also bend forwards and backwards. As you can see, there is another joint at the top of the chest area, but I'm not entirely sure what this does because I can't seem to get any extra articulation out of it. Now, there are ball joints in the hips, so the legs will kick out to the side, they'll kick forwards, kick backwards, and there are another double joint at the knees there as well. Now, at the bottom of the foot, there is a sort of ball joint, swivel joint, just at the top of the ankle there to move the foot from side to side. There is a hinge that allows the foot to move up and down, and it will also rock from side to side as well. And then finally, there is some toe articulation there in a straight hinge. Accessories wise, he just comes with his question mark staff. Of course, he also has that trading card and the standard display stand that all of these McFarlane Toys figures come with, but this is the only real meaningful accessories that he has, and this is fine. I'm not quite sure about the colorization of this. I thought this was more of a green, but I could be wrong. I think this works absolutely fine. It's quite bendy, as you can see, but it's another nice sculpt with plenty of detail. There's some fairly decent paint apps. We actually see some gold on this around the rim and the end of the staff, which is quite nice, but overall, once again, it's missing an opportunity to really capitalize on this sculpt. As you can see, he has no issues holding this at all. Both hands can snugly grip this staff with no issues whatsoever. His hands are just big enough, and the staff itself is quite flexible, so there's no issues here. This works pretty well for the most part. And as a quick scale comparison, here he is standing next to the DC Multiverse McFarlane Toys Batman from Arkham Asylum. As you can see, these scale quite nicely next to each other and they look pretty cool, I have to say. I think this works very nicely all in all. And as a brief comparison, here is the DC Collectibles version in the same scale of the same character. Obviously, DC Collectibles much more statuesque in their approach, much more limited articulation, but a lot more detail, a lot more fantastic paint apps. You can see, for example, how they have bothered to paint in each of the individual question marks on his costume. And also that staff has a number of different paint washes on it, which are green and black, and I think that looks much improved. But other than that, I actually think probably the sculpting is a little bit more authentic on this new version, and in terms of the articulation, obviously it's heads and shoulders above the DC Collectibles version. Okay then, in terms of final thoughts, I'm going to give this figure 4 stars, because I think the figure itself is actually really cool. I think the articulation, the sculpting, and the accessory that we do get are all really nicely done. I really appreciate them going the extra mile by actually having those shades not being sculpted in, that you can lift them up and see eyes underneath, even if they are looking slightly off-center, which is a bit strange. But other than that, this is a really nice figure. It's a really nice one to add to the collection, and there's nothing glaringly bad or disappointing about this figure that I felt warranted removing more stars. So why hasn't he got 5 stars? Well, as ever, as I constantly bemoan whenever I do a McFarlane Toys review, it seems to be the perennial issue, at least in their DC Multiverse line. They are doing these fantastic sculpts, but they are not capitalizing with great paint washes, and they really just need that to push these figures over the edge. A lot of these figures where I'm giving them 4 stars could so easily be 5-star figures if they just took that initiative and just went that one step further to really enhance their offering in this area. So that's a little bit disappointing as ever. The other issue I would say is that I'm disappointed by the lack of accessories. Now, I'm really glad that we got his staff, which is great, but it would have been cool to have some alternate hands, but more so a Riddler trophy would have been so key here, since they're such a key feature of the games. And to make matters worse, they kind of emphasise the point by taking that image on the back of the box, which is the Riddler holding up a Riddler trophy, as if to emphasise that point. So yeah, I wish they'd included a Riddler trophy. That would have made all the difference here. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.